Hey everyone, it is 3:30. My name is Candy Black. I am your World Language Associate in the Office of Bilingual and Education and World Languages at the New York State Education Department. And my two primary functions are to support world language educators, especially as it relates to implementing the new standards, but it also is to manage Seal of Biliteracy programs across our state. So I am thrilled to be able to welcome you to our second webinar in the very first 2023 professional learning series for the Seal of Biliteracy entitled Growing Your Seal Program. It's my pleasure to be able to co-present with a good friend and a trusted colleague. And so we are going to jump right in. I'm going to invite my co-host, Sarah, to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Chaffee. I am the K-12 academic administrator for ENL and World Languages at Shenendehowa Central School District. If you're not familiar with Shenendehowa, it's in upstate New York in Saratoga County, just north of the capital. And we are in our fifth year awarding the Seal of Biliteracy to our students.
And what Sarah didn't mention is she has one of the top 2 schools in the state in terms of the number of SEAL earners. So she has some great experience coming along with her. I already introduced myself. So I do want to let you know that you can see on the left, we have a handy dandy little digital badge. So our office issues micro credentials for people who participate in all of our webinars. So you will be awarded this badge along with your certificate, and we'll talk a little bit later about how to access those. Now, so that you are not scrambling to find things, you're going to see throughout this session a variety of QR codes and links. And the PDF of the PowerPoint that we are showing you is going to be placed in this folder, and we will repeat, and everyone will get a follow-up email tonight with the link to this folder. So everything we're going to talk about today is located in this electronics handout folder. However, it's also all available on our Seal of Biliteracy website. So without further ado, I'm going to just review very quickly what is the Seal of Biliteracy. Now, presumably all of you already have a Seal of Biliteracy program at your school, but just in case, the seal is a distinction that is issued by the New York State Education Department that recognizes students who can demonstrate a high level of proficiency in English and one or more other world languages by high school graduation. And peppered throughout this presentation, you will see a variety of photos of actual New York State SEAL graduates from different districts across the state from last year. Now, we're going to cover a variety of strategies to expand your program, and they are summarized on the graphic here. They include doing things like raising awareness. That's our core message for today. Identifying candidates and doing so early. Streamlining the Culminating Project. Celebrating visibly, utilizing SEAL program hacks from our schools, reflecting on your program, and finally, asking for assistance. So let's start off with raising awareness. There are 3 core groups of people, of stakeholders, that you need to raise awareness of the SEAL in. And that includes our faculty and staff, our students, and the families and communities that make up our school community. So let's start with faculty and staff. We highly recommend that you consider doing an informational presentation at a faculty or staff meeting to cover questions like what the SEAL is, who's eligible, who is the SEAL coordinator at the school, why it's important to develop these global citizens, meaning those who can communicate in more than one language and those who can act with cultural competence. You also might want to include which neighboring schools already offer the SEAL. If you already do this, we encourage you to consider offering a very quick refresher each start of the year to update staff and inform new staff that join you. Now, there's a couple of reasons why you might want to do this. One is because it's very difficult to reach all of your students, but by engaging with an army of faculty and staff, you can do that a little bit better. So you want to ensure that every adult a student might come into contact with is capable of giving a basic elevator speech on the seal. So if mom and dad see you at open house and say, oh, I heard there's a seal of biliteracy, you don't have to say, oh, well, go and see so-and-so. You can give them a little elevator speech as well as point them in the right direction. In terms of what teachers should be able to talk about is, what is the seal? Why should students consider it? And where can they get more information? You may also want to do this to be able to identify faculty and staff who speak a language other than English in your school, because these are valuable resources. You can highlight adults in the school that speak a language other than English to demonstrate to students what the benefits are of being a global citizen. You can also identify potential human resources to assist you with the seal. And we'll talk a little bit more later about what roles they can play. You also may want to encourage the faculty and staff you speak to engage in your seal process. They can join the Seal of Biliteracy Committee. They can become a project mentor or advisor. Now, note that proficiency in the language that the student may do the project is helpful, but it's not required. They can also become a panelist, that is one of the people that evaluates student projects. If they do become a panelist, proficiency in the language of the presentation is required, obviously, because they have to understand the student in order to be able to evaluate them. You also may want to reach out to faculty and staff to really capitalize on their positive and supportive relationships with individual students to encourage them to pursue the seal. Sometimes all students need is a positive word from a trusted adult to have the confidence to go after this. Now, for students, you're going to have to take a similar multi-pronged approach, because no one strategy is going to reach all students. So you may wish to start by getting those students who are in your classes. So in-class presentations by teachers, whether they be ELA, ENL, or world languages, are highly effective. And you might consider not just doing this senior year where you're actually recruiting those students, but talking to all of your classes in the high school from 9 all the way to seniors, so that they start thinking about the seal and making those plans ahead of time. In addition to those in-class presentations, you might also want to do some morning announcements or put articles in a school newspaper or an e-blast. You might also want to invite potential candidates to consider the seal by sending a personalized letter or email home. And this can be done using mailmers so that it's a little bit more effective in terms of the use of your time. To do this, you're going to want to collect some data ahead of time, as well as potentially some teacher recommendations to identify those candidates. One of the things that I used to include in my letter home was an indication of the points that a student had already earned towards the seal. So when you think about the English criteria, students can earn a point from getting an 80 on the ELA exam. And most of the students at my school already took the ELA as 10th graders. So I would be able to say, well, you've already earned a point towards the seal. Or if they're juniors and have completed a checkpoint C course as they go into senior year with an 85 or better, they've already earned a point there. One of the really key roles on the Seal of Biliteracy Committee is filled by school counselors. They assist with anything from transcripts all the way to recruiting students. And they're very effective because they're one of the constants that students will have throughout high school, usually following students all the way from 9th grade. They can talk to students early on. They know whether the student speaks a home language other than English. And they can encourage students to pursue the seal by making it part of their 4-year graduation plan. In addition to those strategies, you might hold a student interest meeting on the seal. Focus on making the process doable, ensuring that students know they will be supported throughout. Highlight that the Seal of Biliteracy is an award. By the way, it's an award that less than 3% of New York State graduates actually earn, so it's a wonderful way for them to distinguish themselves. And if you are able, because you've had the seal before, consider inviting a past seal earner to speak. Invite a student who's now gone off to college or gone off into the work world to come back and talk about their journey to the Seal of Biliteracy. So our last stakeholder group for raising awareness has to do with families and the larger school community. Again, we talked about sending a personalized letter home to inform families and the student about the seal, highlighting that the student, in your estimation, is a viable candidate for the Seal of Biliteracy. You might also consider holding a parent information meeting, and you can include 9th through 11th grade families as well as families of seniors. If you have some kind of parent night, consider giving a brief presentation at open house or other school event. We have some wonderful handouts to provide to you, and we have a number of them that are provided in the preferred language of our English language learners. So if you know that you have a significant L population in your school, you may wish to consider how your school can reach those families by providing that communication in their preferred language. So another thing that you can do to raise awareness among all these groups includes some kind of significant mention in your course guide or program of studies. This legitimizes the seal and raises it up to the academic level of all your other credential programs. Again, you include basic information like what the seal is, who's eligible, why students should pursue it, and when they can begin working towards the seal. You may also want to develop a page on your district website for the seal. Again, you'll include some basic information, links to various documents. You can link to anything you'd like to on our seal page, as well as contact information for students and family to get more information. Again, if you are able, it's very helpful to provide multilingual support for families whose preferred language is other than English. You can also create a bulletin board that is prominently displayed in your school, giving students information on the SEAL program, but maybe also including things like photos of past and present SEAL candidates and contact information. Of course, social media is a big part about how our students and our school communities communicate. So if your school uses social media, consider posting information on the SEAL at key times in the year. You may want to promote a student or parent meeting in the fall, indicate that information will become available at a certain school event or time of year, as well as celebrating student success once they've met the requirements to earn the seal. So we're going to move on to our next strategy for growing your program, and that has to do with identifying candidates. In my opinion, this is one of the most powerful things that you can do to ensure you're casting a wide net for all potential SEAL candidates. So there are 4 possible eligible categories for the SEAL. The first one are our current English language learners, abbreviated as ELLs. These are students who have been identified through our state process as English language learners. You may consider starting with your ELLs who are at an expanding level by the beginning of senior year. Your second group of eligible candidates are former English language learners. These are students who were once identified as ELLs, but who have since achieved the required proficiency to exit ELL status. Your next category are your heritage language speakers. These are students who were never identified as English language learners, but whose home language is other than English. These students who were never identified as ELLs speak a language other than English at home and can be challenging to identify, but we're going to give you a strategy for that. Finally, our fourth category are our world language learners. These are never ELLs whose home language is English. They were never identified as English language learners, but they're studying a world language at school. So how do you identify these 4 categories? Well, your world language students are simply the rosters of students who have completed or are currently completing a Checkpoint C course with an 85 or better. Your current ELLs can be on a roster of current students. Just contact your ENL teachers, who will also have access to the student's most recent NYSSB score. Remember, you're looking for expanding or better. Your former or ever ELLs can also be identified by either your ENL teachers who may have worked with them or your counselors. Again, counselors can look for rosters of any students who took the NYSSB at any time and have exited that status. Now, your fourth category, your heritage language speakers, these can be the most challenging to identify. And the reason is because some school student management systems don't capture a world language that a student speaks if they're not identified as an L. So one of the things that I did as a former SEAL coordinator is I asked all of my ELA teachers to give a very brief presentation on the SEAL one day and to ask their classes, does anyone speak a language other than English? Because we want to be able to make this award available to you. And we simply had students give their names, and then I contacted them as the SEAL coordinator. Now, I want to give you a sense of the size of the L population in New York, because these Ls and these former Ls are ideal SEAL candidates because they come to you already proficient in their home language. So the graph that you see in front of you is a graph of the 10 most common languages of our English language learners. There are more than 200,000 current English language learners in New York State from all different grade levels. And there are even more former Ls and heritage language speakers. We hope that as you cast this wide net, that you consider specifically inviting these ideal candidates. Now, the question may come of when do you identify the candidates? Well, after the end of junior year, you can identify all those who are, quote, on track or close to being on track, those rising seniors who may have earned points towards the Seal of Biliteracy. The kinds of points you're looking for are available on our criteria document, and they include things like your ELA Regents score, a NYSSB score if they're an English language learner, scores on other Regents exams other than English that were taken not in translation, again, only for our English language learners, the ELA course grade in 11th grade, any AP or IB exams in English or a world language, the world language course grade in 11th, any languages spoken or studied, any transcripts that students may have provided from other nations, as well as any home language arts or native language arts course grades for students in bilingual programs. Now, we talk about not only identifying candidates, but identifying them early. We highly recommend, whenever possible, to begin tracking students starting in 9th grade, noting pre-indicators. That is, course grades in ELA and world language or scores on AP exams. Now, course grades in anything lower than 11th grade aren't earning students points towards the SEAL, but they are good indicators to track student progress. School counselors can utilize this data as soon as freshman year to begin talking to students who are on track and say to them, let's make the Seal of Biliteracy part of your four-year graduation plan. We encourage our SEAL coordinators to utilize this end-of-year data proactively and to create an end-of-year data form for each graduation cohort so as to track students all the way from 9th to 12th grade. You can request annual updates from your district data coordinator to ensure that you're catching all those students who may transfer into your school or who may have taken something for another point, like an AP exam in a subsequent year. So I'm happy to pass on to my colleague the next portion of this presentation. Sarah?
Great, thanks, Candy. So one of the most important components of the Seal of Biliteracy is the Culminating Project. And it also happens to be an important way to, or a good place to streamline as much as possible. So first I wanna talk a little bit about sort of a reminder of what is the Culminating Project. So as a reminder, the Culminating Project earns 2 points, and most students will likely need to complete the Culminating Project as part of the Seal of Biliteracy. So it's worth 2 points. It must be based on research conducted using a variety of sources. You must have a written portion, and it must be presented orally or be signed. And just keep in mind that students may need assistance in finding appropriate research articles in the target language. And whenever possible, you want to try to prioritize authentic resources that reflect the culture that the student is studying. So this should also be a topic of interest to students. And there is a lot of power in providing students with a choice on what their topic is. The English project can be from any class, since we are evaluating English proficiency. And this is one of the places where my own district really realized within the first year or so, we were so focused on pulling that project from an English class, that we overlooked the possibility that existed in other content areas like social studies or even health, where students had done research projects. And we're going to talk a little bit about the embedding of the project in a moment. So we'll come back to this idea. If the student needs a culminating project for both English and the world language, please keep in mind that the projects must be different. You can't do a translation of one project into another language. That's not permitted. And then following the student's presentation of the project, a panel of at least 2 adults who speak the language of the presentation will then interview the student. So some examples of projects, and we really want to encourage you to sort of think outside the box a little bit. But so keeping in mind that the project could be a scholarly essay or research paper. All written portions really should be on demand, by the way. That is completed by the individual student under the supervision of the teacher advisor and without access to an online translator. You want to note too that all of the Seal of Biliteracy projects must have a written portion that consists of traditional prose or academic writing. If the student uses a visual aid, such as PowerPoint slides, to present their project, the text on the PowerPoint should be minimal. We don't want, obviously, students reading off of the slides. So we're looking for limited information on the slides and no complete sentences. This does not count as the written portion of the project, just so you're aware. It would not be sufficient to evaluate the student's presentation skills, and it would encourage students, again, to read their presentation, which is not allowed. The portfolio of individual student work is another possibility of a project. Just note that it has to be individual student work, not group work. So it may be, that you can discuss that it can be more difficult for a student to present a portfolio, especially if the pieces of the portfolio are not related. So this is a possibility, but you just want to keep those couple of things in mind. And then again, we encourage you to think outside the box. You want to allow students to be creative. Candy has a great example of an art project in which the student composed their own artistic project, for example, a painting, and based on the study of the artist from the target culture, and then wrote a narrative about their creation in the target language. So there are lots of possibilities. And when in doubt, please, we encourage you to reach out to us. I mean, you can reach out to either of us. You can also reach out to your local RBERN. If you're not familiar with RBERN, that is the Regional Bilingual Educational Resource Network. And they have representatives who can support you with the seal. We also suggest reaching out to a neighboring district. That's what we did when we started. We went to a neighboring district and said, can you get us started, help us out? So there are all kinds of possibilities for you there.
Sarah, did you want to talk about the SEAL guidance toolkit, or do you want to
wait? Yeah. Yep. Sorry. Thanks, Candy. There's also the SEAL guidance toolkit. There are just a ton of resources available to you online through the New York State Education Department. Candy's actually going to talk about some of those in more detail a little bit later. But for example, there are examples of student presentations and videos that you can access there, which will also, help you to think of some things that your students can do. Thanks, Candy. So still talking again about the culminating project, we want to just make sure you understand the role of the advisor. So the advisor is often the classroom teacher. We strongly recommend this. That is the person who is in most contact with the student and on a regular basis. So anytime the advisor can be the classroom teacher, that's great. While it is helpful for the advisor to speak the language of the project, it's not required. We have in our district designated committee members whose sole purpose is to focus on those students that Candy mentioned earlier who speak a language other than English, but they are not in ENL classrooms because they're not Ls, and they are not in any of the world language classrooms of the languages that we teach in our district. So we have someone who is their sole focus is to coordinate those students. And clearly that person does not speak the language of the students when they're completing the project. So advisors do shepherd and advise students through the process. They monitor their progress throughout the year, make suggestions, answer questions, connect them with other people, that they might need help from, give them feedback on their writing, and really act as a liaison between the SEAL committee and coordinator and the student. For students who are not enrolled in a class supporting the project, you might want to consider using an advisor log. There's a link in these slides so that you can take a look at that. And that way your SEAL coordinator has an easy on-demand access to student progress and can kind of keep an eye on how things are going. And then we encourage you to really plan the Culminating Project as early in the year as possible, as you may need to recruit panelists who speak the target language, especially if the language is a low incidence language. But by engaging faculty beyond ELA, ENL, and world languages to serve as advisors and panelists. Again, they have to speak the language, but for English Culminating Projects, consider having staff be on, a part of that process. Administrators, counselors, etc. They can serve as panelists. We'll talk a little bit about it a bit later as well, but in our district, we incorporated these presentations for the Culminating Project into our Regents Week, and many of our panelists are actually teachers in the district, and this becomes their proctoring assignment, and it has become a very popular proctoring assignment. Many teachers would rather hear all of the cool things that kids are doing and hear their presentations, and in a couple of different languages or more than perhaps standing in the gym, right? Proctoring an exam. So it's become a pretty popular proctoring assignment for us. And finally, ask the students who they would like to have as a panelist. Maybe there's a teacher that has really, sort of guided them along the way, or someone that they want there to see their good work. They can certainly give you some feedback on that too. And then finally, engage your community members to serve as advisors and panelists. So we have many low incidence languages in our district. We have over 50 different languages that are spoken. So we find ourselves often reaching out to the community, to local colleges, community-based organizations, families, parents, really just trying to tap into those resources. It's also really good public relations for the district, especially if you're connecting with businesses or community members. And certainly when in doubt, you can reach out to your local BOCES or your regional RBERN. We did have to do that this year. We had a student who wanted to complete the Seal of Biliteracy in Czech. And I reached out to Candy and I said, Candy, can you help me? And she found someone in Utica who streamed in and helped score the presentation as a panel member. So that was pretty cool. And then I would say, if there's one thing that you take away from today's discussion and presentation, it really should be this: embed as much as you can of the project in the coursework that already exists, so that the work the student is already doing becomes the work for the Seal of Biliteracy. And then the only extra is the presentation of the project to the panel whenever you decide to do your panels. We embed our world language project right into our world language coursework. We allow students to select their English Culminating Project from any subject area, not just their English class. And then it really becomes much more streamlined, easier to keep track of, and really it supports the learning that's going on in the world language classroom that way too. So when it comes to identifying panelists, we've talked about this a little bit already, but keeping in mind that a panelist will listen to the student's presentation of the project as well as evaluate both the presentation and the written portion of the project to determine if the student has met the criteria to earn the seal. So panelists may be any adult, except they may not be an adult related to the student, but any adult who speaks and reads the language of the presentation. And this could be high school teachers, it could be middle school teachers. That's also a really great thing to do. A lot of middle school teachers love coming to the Seal of Biliteracy presentations and seeing the growth that their students have had since they taught them in middle school. Again, community members, and don't forget about college professors of your local colleges and universities. Panelists can be virtual when necessary, as I mentioned, in a pinch. That really worked great for us. A question that we field a lot is compensation. How should advisors or panelists, be compensated? But panelists are generally school employees, right? So they either volunteer their time, or you could build it in as, like I said earlier, like a proctoring duty. And then, compensation really depends on the district, but it could be, an hourly rate, or in the case of a larger program, it could take the form of a duty. And again, that's what we do at the end of the school year. Ours becomes a proctoring duty. And how are the projects conducted? So this is a great sort of timeline to help you understand the process. So starting with the SEAL coordinator, and recruiting a minimum of 2 panelists to evaluate the presentation. Again, I would strongly recommend that you start that process early. And the students are completing their projects. And again, they could be completing them, in your world language class, or an English class, or a class in which English is the language. And then the SEAL coordinator schedules presentations in 15 to 20-minute blocks. 15 to 20 minutes tends to leave enough time for students to come in, to present, to have questions from the panel. You also have to have a little bit of time in between, right? So students can kind of think about what it is they're going to say, or what it is they're going to be doing. Once the student has completed their presentation and you've asked questions, the panelists need to have a little bit of time to talk about the project itself and what the score should be, after they've interviewed the student and asked their questions. And we really strongly recommend that you not wait and have that conversation as panelists until later, that you have it after each student has presented. If you're a school district with a number of students earning the seal, you may go through many presentations in a day, back to back to back, and then to come together at the end of the day and try to think about where the score lands for a student who went earlier in the day, is really challenging. So we recommend sort of building into that time a chance to talk together as panelists and decide the score then. And then finally, some helpful tips on conducting the presentations and interviews. So there's not really an exact time or length of time of the presentation. Students will ask us that a lot, but it's our experience that a student presentation is typically lasts between 3 and 5 minutes. That's typically enough time for panelists to gather enough evidence of the student's proficiency in presentational communication. And then an interview between 3 and 5 minutes can generally provide the same evidence of student proficiency in interpersonal communication. So again, that's why we recommend blocks of about 15 to 20 minutes for the students to share their evidence, for the panelists to come to consensus on the score and on the proficiency level achieved. Most schools do this in the spring. Again, we do ours during Regents Week. Sometimes if we have students who are trying again, we have them go in January. So that's another possibility, to use that Regents exam week in January. But most students will do it in their senior year. Some schools, we are one of them, They have students present in their best language in junior year and then do their second best language in their senior year. For us, it was a function of our size and how many students we had that we felt we really needed to start the process in the junior year. But it's also important to conduct a training session for your panelists. We have done this in person and we have done it virtually. But it's an opportunity, and it doesn't need to take very long, but it's an opportunity to sort of explain to the panelists the process, to take a look at the rubric, review the non-negotiables that you're requiring of the students. For example, that the entire student presentation needs to be in the target language. It also gives you a chance to provide examples of questions that they can ask students. Keep in mind that those questions should not generate yes or no answers, but they should be information seeking so the student can really show you their interpersonal capabilities. And also helping panelists understand that the questions must be maybe carefully designed to elicit a response that makes up for a deficiency in a presentational mode. So if there's something that you're not quite certain about, or you haven't quite been able to glean the student's ability from what they've done, sometimes those questions are an opportunity for you to pull that information from the student. In some cases, the SEAL coordinator will collect rubrics filled out by each panelist. In our district, we have panelists enter the scores for each mode into a Google form. And then I, as the SEAL coordinator, have a great big spreadsheet of all of the feedback from all of the panelists. You can do these, in class. It really depends on your district when it's best for you to hold them, but you can do them in class. You can do them after school. We definitely recommend sort of a holding room where students who are waiting until it is their turn to present can wait. It just makes the flow of it much faster, especially if you have very large numbers. As soon as one student is done, it's great when they walk out and the next student is ready to come in and get started. So some schools have students present only to the panel. Others, with permission from a student presenter, allow other students or faculty members to attend the student presentations. I tend to float around and visit and listen in on them. Always helpful to make sure that students have uploaded their presentation or visual to a shared drive. We've tried lots of different platforms, but frankly, Google Classroom seems to be the best way for us to keep track of their components. And that way we can pull them up in the classroom when the student walks in to do their presentation. So we have it ahead of time so we don't waste time. We want to ensure that students are familiar with the rubric, the format of the presentation, as well as any tips. So we send out a tip sheet ahead of time to students. Remember, no reading, right? Presentation is in the target language only. Make sure your slides don't have a lot of words on them. So when the student walks in, we welcome each student. We briefly explain the process, which although by then they already really know it, and we just have a little bit of a conversation, just try to put them at ease. And then we recommend that you wait until after the presentation day to reveal the results to the students. There will be students that could benefit from another chance to present. So that's another very common question that I hear often is, can students do that? And the answer is yes, retakes are possible. So if a student really doesn't make it through the presentation, we will reschedule the presentation. Sometimes we have them continue on with language the next year, and maybe we'll scoop them up during January regents and have them do a retake. But yes, they are possible. And now celebrate. Oh yeah, so celebrate visibly. So this is a part that I am excited to talk about. This is something that we started our program during COVID. So the very first year that we did the Seal of Biliteracy, our kids were all virtual. So we were very excited when we had an opportunity to really celebrate students who earned the seal. And I would really highly recommend that you do this. So we present certificates. That students earn a medallion. There's no greater PR for the Seal of Biliteracy than that medallion, and siblings and other students at graduation seeing the students who are graduating wearing that medallion across the stage is really what, you know, can skyrocket your program. So you want to make sure that your students have the medallions, that they're wearing them. Also a formal awards assembly that really celebrates those students very specifically. We were fortunate enough this year to have the Associate Commissioner for the Office of Bilingual Ed and World Languages at our presentation, at our celebration. We actually combined our celebration with the Seal of Civic Readiness. So we celebrated all of those students, and there was a lot of overlap. We also hit up the governor's office and asked if the lieutenant governor would be willing to record something very special for us, which he did. It was very specific to our district, which was lovely. And we were able to show that at our ceremony. So there's lots of ways that you can really celebrate it. And there are lots of folks who are very supportive of the Seal of Biliteracy and who could do that for you. We definitely give students certificates. We make a note of it in the graduation program. We have a little, a notation next to the student's name that states that they are Seal of Biliteracy earners. You could display a plaque at your school with the names of the prior Seal of Biliteracy earners. And again, going back to what Candy said earlier about social media, lots and lots of photos of graduates wearing their medallions is also really, really good PR for your program. Some districts, I know this is becoming a really popular tradition. Some districts have their graduates parade at their prior elementary schools. If you have your medallions and time to do that, we strongly recommend that your students wear those medallions so younger kids can see them. Publish the names of your seal earners, maybe with photos, in a newsletter, on the website, or even your local newspaper. And then highlight the voices of SEAL candidates by creating a promotional video. This is really great because it celebrates the kids who have earned the SEAL, and it also encourages the up and coming kids to consider the SEAL as something. So some kind of video presentation of your current students and your SEAL earners is really helpful. And then SEAL program hacks. So some of these are not really in any particular order, but there are lots of things that we've learned along the way that make this just, easier for us to do. Little tips and tricks that some of us have taken a few years to figure out, and now you don't have to. So you want to make sure you have a really strong relationship with your district data coordinator, whoever it is that shares data from your district with New York State Ed. That's a really important person in this process because Candy is going to ask you for quite a bit of information at the end of the year, and you want to make sure that you have all of the components that you need. Also build relationships with your school counselors. It's very, very helpful for them to understand the process of the SEAL and what it's going to look like on the transcript, because that becomes a very common question. ELA teachers, ENL teachers, world language teachers, all of them become very important in the SEAL process. You want to also, ahead of time, we learned this kind of the hard way. You want to make sure that early on you gather those New York State identification numbers for your students. Those are required on the data collection form that you will send to Candy. And as soon as you have the names of the students who are candidates for the SEAL, you should also have those identification numbers that will make your life a lot easier when you go to send your data information in. Also, mail merge has become a big friend to us. It allows us to give personalized communication, letters home, emails. We do send a notification letter to students once we know that they've earned the SEAL. We also send a notification letter to students who didn't quite make it, and we let them know what components they're still missing. And so anytime you have a system for that or a mail merge for that, that will also make your life a lot easier. So using technology, we originally, there are two ways that, we've kind of done it, both of which are pretty good. If you have a really good student management system, you could put all of the components of the Seal of Biliteracy into your student management system, almost like a grade book. We use a Google spreadsheet, and we house all of the components and all of the student names, all of their identification information in a great big Google spreadsheet that I, as the SEAL coordinator, keep and manage. And my SEAL committee has access to it as well, so they can see, if there are students that still need components. And then we use that roster to let kids know, if they've earned it or not. Student interns. The first year that we started the Seal of Biliteracy, it was actually an administrative intern who was extremely instrumental in helping us get the program up and running. So we encourage you to engage student interns, administrative interns, to help with the technology and the promotion of the SEAL. Also, I mentioned earlier, if you spread out the student workload by having students complete the work of the SEAL in their best language at the end of their junior year, and then their second best language in their senior year, sometimes spreading it out is helpful for students. It also becomes easier for you to manage. Be flexible. There is no required time frame for the SEAL, so be flexible in terms of when students can complete it. The most important thing is, without having a specific time frame, the question you want to ask yourselves is, when will your students be at the required proficiency level in their respective language? That's really the goal, right? Another thing that we learned is the first couple of years we had students register or apply to earn the SEAL. So many students were lost in that process because they were absent on the day their teacher did it. And again, we're working with several hundred students at a time, so we really needed to find a better way to do that. So we no longer do a registration or application process. We have more of an opt-out program. So if you are a student in a world language, you are automatically a candidate for the SEAL. And because it's built into the curriculum for the world language, we have all the names of those students, and their teacher is the advisor. So that way, the only extra thing you have to do outside of all those world language classes is present to, your heritage language learners, your English language learners, your former English language learners, those kids that aren't captured in the world language classes. Again, consider your presentations during Regents Week. I mentioned this earlier. It's a really great proctoring duty for teachers. It doesn't require any missed instructional time, which is wonderful, and it doesn't cost anything either. And then you really want to be sure, and this is a really important part, to stop and reflect on your program. So often the end of the school year becomes a time when you're scrambling to get your data together, and you're scrambling to get kids who, were absent and need to make it up. And, that's on top of all the other craziness that happens at the end of a school year. But it's really important to find some time to stop and really reflect on your program. What is working well? Where are the areas of growth? And really importantly, what were the barriers to student participation? What prevented students from participating? What were the difficult areas for them? Was it, earning a point because of a score on a English Regents? Was it something else? Was it the project? So it's really important to sort of stop and reflect and think about what's working and what's not working. And then when you get into the next year, you can start with, you can start off on a good foot. When you think about the barriers to growth in the program, is it staffing? Is it resources? Is it time? And then try to remove those barriers that you can. So for example, we removed the student application because that definitely became a barrier to kids. Are you providing flexibility on the topic that your students can do, especially in English? Do your students struggle with writing? Is it not the content necessarily, but the writing skills that they're struggling with? And can you set them up with academic writing support in your district? Is there peer review? Can students bring their research projects for the culminating project to another student to help them with that? Do you have direct support for the SEAL? Is your committee meeting regularly? Are your committee members or even your teachers having an opportunity to speak with others about their challenges and what they're encountering? Do you have enough panels? Do you have enough mentors? So be thinking about how other components of the school community can really help you sort of reflect on the program and support those kids that that are struggling or for whom there are some challenges or barriers.
So
now I'm going to pass it back over to Candy.
Thank you. You can see why I invited Sarah to present with us. She has a wealth of resources for this. So one of the other strategies you can use to grow your program is to really ask for assistance. There is nothing wrong with this. We are always stronger together than we are as individual silos. So have more than just the SEAL committee required. You have to have 5 required members, but there's nothing that prevents you from having more. And be sure to delegate. As adults, sometimes this is something we struggle with. We have to do everything ourselves. You're going to be a stronger team when everyone knows what their role is and you can delegate. Reach out to some neighboring schools to see if you can connect with their SEAL coordinators, even if it's just to have somebody to act as a sounding board or to ask questions. If you can, see if you can meet up with them and maybe observe some of their student presentations or a Seal of Biliteracy committee meeting. Talk to your ELA, ENL, and world language teachers. Ask them to talk to their students. What are they hearing from students about why some are pursuing the SEAL and others aren't? And you could always survey students. Create a Google form that you put out there in a newsletter and say, if you didn't pursue the SEAL this year, what might be the reasons? And then see if you can address those barriers. Sarah mentioned this before. I want to highlight my colleagues at the New York State Arborns. Again, this is the Regional Bilingual Educational Resource Network. It's a series of 8 different organizations that are associated with either universities or BOCES that cover the entire state of New York. They focus primarily on services for English language learners, but they also offer professional learning and they also support the Seal of Biliteracy. So on this PDF of the presentation that you'll receive in the follow-up email I'm going to send you, these are all links that you can click to see who your person is to reach out for assistance. Now, we also have a wonderful group called the SEAL Forum. This is a monthly meeting of volunteers, of SEAL coordinators from across the state in different parts of their SEAL journey. Some have veteran experience like Sarah and have been offering the SEAL for a long time. Others may be in their 1st or 2nd year, and we even have a couple of people who are still in their planning year and are using this to network with people and figure out what it's going to look like at their district, but they're not yet offering the SEAL. We talk about all of your questions. We have discussions. You get to network with other coordinators, and attendance is completely voluntary at the SEAL Forum. We meet once a month via Zoom for 1 hour. It's on a Monday from September to June, and it's always after school. You'll get CTLA credit for any meetings that you attend, and we have an online shared drive where we put all of our agendas, our minutes, as well as any other helpful materials. We also started recording these sessions this year, just the presentation portion of it, not the question and answer. So you'll have access to those videos on the online drive. It's completely free to join. You'll get the join link here when you get this, and you get another wonderful digital badge attesting to your participation, which, by the way, is a nice thing to have if you happen to be going up for tenure or you need to demonstrate your professional commitment on your teacher evaluation rubric at the end of the year. We have a ton of resources. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them, just so you know where they are. We have our core document called our SEAL Handbook. This is what it looks like. This is an interior page. It has all the criteria to earn the SEAL, as well as the approved assessments for English and world languages. There's 111 of those assessments. And we have over 100 frequently asked questions and answers, and we are continuously updating this document. As Sarah mentioned, we also have the Seal Guidance Toolkit. This is a series of 8 modules designed to walk Seal of Biliteracy committees through their first year in offering the seal. You can see our Module 1 is getting started, but they also have modules on how to monitor student success, how to celebrate, and how to complete the end-of-year data form. We also have Seal one-pagers. These are front and back, nice color, attractive one-pagers for different stakeholders that describe in simple language what the seal is, how it benefits students, and then some questions that are catered for the particular audience. You can see we have these for students, counselors, administrators, families, teachers, and Culminating Project advisors, as well as panelists. We also have the parent and student versions available in the top 10 languages of our English language learners. So if you want to print these out for open house in Russian or Uzbek, we've got them for you. Just download them from our website. For those of you who may be working with students on their culminating projects in a variety of languages, we have a Wakelet, which is a free online content curation platform that was created by the various embassies of European countries in New York City. It's something that came out of the European Day of Languages a few years ago. We also have our annual report, which is a very detailed report. This year should be coming out in the next month or so. And along with that, we also have some infographics. But I want to highlight to you as we close up this webinar that we have a series on the seal. In November, we'll be talking about the school notification form. In December, we'll talk about promotion with my colleague Francisco Garcia Quezada. In January, I'll be working with David Mumper, talking to you about how to support students through the Culminating Project. I'm sorry, that's with my colleague Maria Fenton in January. In February, I'll be working with my colleague David Mumper on how to use the SEAL rubric to evaluate Culminating Project presentations. In March, I'll be working with Dr. Jordan Gonzalez on how to train panelists to evaluate projects. And then finally, I'll have the pleasure of working with my colleague from the Midwest Arbor, Anna Stukes, on demystifying the end-of-year data form. All of these ideas for these webinars came out of that SEAL forum, so please consider joining. So I believe that we met all of our goals in talking to you about some various strategies. I'm going to include my contact information on the follow-up email that I send you, but I want to thank you for being here.